Emma Carter balanced a silver tray carefully as she moved through the crowded ballroom of the Grand Crescent Hotel. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above hundreds of wealthy guests dressed in designer gowns and tailored suits. Laughter echoed through the hall while photographers captured every glamorous moment of the charity gala. Emma kept her eyes focused on her work, ignoring the exhaustion in her legs after another 12-hour shift. She had learned long ago that invisible people survived easier in places like this. As she approached the VIP table, she overheard a heated discussion about stock markets and investment failures. One executive confidently quoted a financial statistic that made Emma pause. Quietly and politely, she corrected the number while pouring wine into his glass. The table fell silent for a second before a few guests looked at her with surprise. "That's actually impressive," one older investor admitted. "Most people here don't even know that." Before Emma could respond, Victoria Blackwell leaned back in her chair with a cold smile. Diamonds sparkled around her neck as she looked Emma up and down with obvious disgust. "Please," Victoria scoffed loudly. "She's a waitress. Girls like her memorize random facts to sound intelligent." Several guests shifted uncomfortably. Victoria wasn't finished. "People should stay in the lane they belong in." An illiterate waitress pretending to understand billion-dollar business deals is honestly embarrassing. The cruel words cut through the ballroom. Emma's face flushed, but instead of lowering her head, she calmly set the wine bottle down. Then she looked directly at Victoria and corrected another complicated financial statement she had made earlier, explaining the mistake flawlessly. Every voice in the room disappeared. The silence around the VIP table grew painfully heavy as Emma finished explaining the financial error. Several executives exchanged stunned glances, clearly impressed by the precision of her analysis. One man even pulled out his phone to verify the numbers she mentioned. Within seconds, his eyes widened. "She's right," he muttered. Victoria's confident expression cracked instantly. She forced out a laugh, hoping to regain control of the room, but nobody joined her this time. The attention had completely shifted away from the billionaire's wife and onto the quiet waitress standing beside the table. Ethan Blackwell studied Emma carefully. Unlike everyone else in the ballroom, she didn't look proud or arrogant after proving Victoria wrong. She simply stood there calmly, holding the tray in steady hands as if humiliation and praise meant exactly the same to her. "Where did you learn finance?" Ethan finally asked. Emma hesitated for a moment. "Books," she answered softly. "And experience." Victoria rolled her eyes dramatically. "How inspiring. Maybe next she'll tell us she plans to run a corporation from the kitchen." A few nervous chuckles spread across the table, but Ethan didn't smile. Instead, he asked Emma another question about market trends. To everyone's shock, she answered immediately, breaking down complex investment patterns with remarkable clarity. Even the senior executives listened carefully. Victoria's jaw tightened with anger. She realized the guests were no longer admiring her beauty or wealth. They were fascinated by the waitress she had tried to embarrass. As Emma turned to leave, Ethan stopped her. "Wait," he said firmly. "I'd like you to join us for a moment." The entire ballroom stared in disbelief, while Victoria's face burned with humiliation for the very first time. Emma froze when Ethan pulled out an empty chair at the VIP table. Every instinct told her to refuse. Waitresses didn't sit beside billionaires and investors. They served quietly, smiled politely, and disappeared into the background. But the entire ballroom was watching, and Ethan's expression remained serious. "Please," he repeated calmly. With hesitant steps, Emma placed her tray aside and sat carefully at the edge of the chair. Whispers immediately spread through the room. Some guests looked curious, while others seemed offended by the sight of a waitress sitting among the city's elite. Victoria gripped her champagne glass tightly enough to crack a nail. Ethan continued asking Emma questions about business trends, company risks, and market behavior. To everyone's surprise, she answered each one with intelligence and confidence. She explained complicated financial concepts in simple language that even some guests understood better than the executive's usual jargon. One investor leaned forward with genuine interest. You speak like someone with years of corporate experience. Emma gave a small smile. Knowledge doesn't always come from expensive offices. The comment hit the table harder than anyone expected. Victoria forced another laugh, though frustration trembled in her voice. Well, intelligence is useless without class. Emma finally looked directly at her. Real class is how you treat people who can do nothing for you. A stunned silence followed. Several guests lowered their eyes awkwardly. Ethan couldn't hide the admiration growing on his face. For years he had attended endless galas filled with fake smiles and rehearsed conversations, yet this waitress spoke with more honesty than anyone he had met in elite society. Victoria noticed the way Ethan looked at Emma. And for the first time, fear crept into her heart. The gala continued, but the atmosphere around the VIP table had completely changed. Conversations became tense and distracted as guests secretly whispered about Emma. Some admired her confidence, while others wondered how a waitress could possess such deep financial knowledge. Across the ballroom, people kept glancing toward the table where Ethan Blackwell seemed far more interested in speaking with Emma than entertaining wealthy investors. Victoria noticed every second of it. Her forced smile never left her face, but beneath the polished appearance, anger boiled uncontrollably. She had spent years building her image as the perfect billionaire's wife, beautiful, sophisticated, untouchable. Yet in a single evening, a waitress had stolen the attention she believed belonged only to her. Emma tried standing to leave politely. I should get back to work. But Ethan stopped her again. One last question. She sat back down cautiously. If you had control of a failing company, Ethan asked, what's the first thing you would change? The nearby executives listened carefully, almost amused by the challenge. But Emma answered without hesitation. I'd stop rewarding people for appearances and start rewarding actual ability. Several people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Emma continued calmly, explaining how companies often collapse because leaders ignore talented employees simply because they come from ordinary backgrounds. Every sentence sounded painfully relevant to the people sitting around her. Ethan looked genuinely impressed. Victoria suddenly pushed her chair back loudly. This is ridiculous, she snapped. Are we seriously taking business advice from a waitress carrying wine trays? The ballroom quieted again. Emma slowly stood, meeting Victoria's furious stare without fear. Maybe, she said softly. That's why your company has been losing money. A few guests gasped while Ethan struggled to hide a smile. Victoria's face turned pale with shock after Emma's remark. For a moment, nobody in the ballroom dared to speak. The orchestra in the corner continued playing softly, but the music only made the silence around the VIP table feel more intense. Several executives exchanged nervous glances. Everyone in the business world knew Blackwell Enterprises had been struggling recently, though nobody ever mentioned it publicly in front of Victoria. Emma's words had struck directly at a truth the entire room avoided. Victoria stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly across the marble floor. How dare you speak to me like that? She hissed. Emma remained calm despite the hundreds of eyes fixed on her. You insulted me first, she replied quietly. I only answered honestly. The tension became unbearable. Ethan slowly rose from his seat before Victoria could continue shouting. Instead of defending his wife, he turned toward Emma with curiosity. What would you do differently? He asked. The question shocked everyone. Victoria stared at her husband in disbelief. Ethan, this girl is humiliating us. No, he answered coldly. She's being honest. Emma hesitated, unsure whether she should continue. But after years of being ignored because of her social status, something inside her refused to stay silent anymore. She explained how companies lose loyal employees when executives treat workers as disposable. She described how arrogance at the top creates fear throughout an organization, preventing innovation and trust. Her words were simple but powerful. One older investor nodded slowly. She's absolutely right. Victoria felt the room slipping away from her completely. The guests who once admired her now looked uncomfortable, even embarrassed by her behavior. Meanwhile, Ethan couldn't stop staring at Emma. For the first time in years, someone had spoken truthfully in front of him without caring about his wealth or influence. Emma barely slept that night. Ethan Blackwell's business card remained on the small table beside her bed like something unreal. She lived in a tiny apartment above a laundromat, far away from the glamorous world of billionaires and luxury galas. The thought of walking into Blackwell Enterprises felt impossible. By morning, anxiety twisted in her stomach. She almost convinced herself not to go. But after years of struggling, sacrificing her dreams, and being underestimated, she decided she couldn't ignore the opportunity. When Emma arrived at the towering Blackwell Enterprises headquarters, employees immediately recognized her from the viral Gala videos. Whispers followed her through the marble lobby. Some stared with curiosity, others with amusement. At the executive floor, Ethan personally greeted her, surprising everyone nearby. "I'm glad you came," he said. He led her into a conference room filled with senior executives reviewing reports from one of the company's failing divisions. The atmosphere turned awkward the moment Emma entered. Several executives exchanged doubtful looks, clearly offended by her presence. "This is Emma Carter," Ethan announced. "She'll be reviewing the reports with us." One executive nearly laughed. "You're serious?" Ethan's cold stare silenced him immediately. As the meeting began, Emma quietly studied the financial documents spread across the table. Within minutes, she noticed inconsistencies in the expense reports and projected earnings. The deeper she looked, the more alarming the mistakes became. Finally, she pointed to several pages. "These numbers don't match the actual market trends," she explained carefully. "If this continues, the company could lose millions within the year." The room fell silent again. The conference room remained silent as Emma explained the errors hidden inside the reports. Charts covered the massive screen behind her while senior executives stared at the documents with growing concern. One by one, they began realizing she was correct. The projected profits had been manipulated to hide serious losses. An older executive adjusted his glasses nervously. "How did none of us catch this?" Emma spoke carefully, aware that every word mattered. "Because everyone focused on making the numbers look impressive instead of asking whether they were real." The comment landed heavily across the room. Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her with clear admiration. For years, he had surrounded himself with experts from the best universities in the world, yet this young woman with no title and no degree had uncovered problems his entire executive team missed. One manager finally lost patience. "With all due respect, she's still just a waitress." Emma looked at him calmly. "And you're still losing money." A few executives lowered their heads to hide embarrassed reactions. Ethan almost smiled before turning serious again. "Emma's observations are accurate. Effective immediately, I want a full review of every department involved." The room erupted into anxious discussion. As executives rushed to defend themselves, Emma quietly gathered her notes.